All right, well, I'm going to kick us off here with some opening remarks. Welcome to the East Bay Leadership Council's Capital Series. Thank you for joining us for what is sure to be, I think, a compelling discussion with Assemblymember Lori Wilson. My name is Mark Orcutt, and I am fortunate to serve as the President and CEO of the East Bay Leadership Council. It is a joy to learn from and help lead such a diverse and politically formidable group. I'm grateful for your attendance and continued support. If you're new to us, we're happy that you're here. The Council is a nonprofit organization led by local employers on a mission to strengthen the economy and improve quality of life in the East Bay. That's a tall order, but one where we have made our mark for decades through strategic advocacy, thoughtful research, informative and inspiring events, and programs that deepen our local impact. It's all made possible thanks to our employer members. If you'd like to learn more, visit our website, eastbayleadershipcouncil.com. While you're there, you'll also see that we're hiring. We have a policy director position just posted last week. If you or someone you know is interested in that role, we would love for you to apply. eastbayleadershipcouncil.com. Next, we have several elected officials tuning in that I want to make sure that we recognize. City of Antioch, Mayor Lamar Thorpe and Council Member Monica Wilson. City of Pittsburgh, Mayor Chanel Scales Preston. City of Hercules, Council Members Dion Bailey, Tiffany Grimsley, and Chris Kelly. City of Brentwood, Council Member Jovita Mendoza. City of Clayton, Council Member Kim Trupiano. From the Contra Costa Water District, Director Pat Young and Antonio Martinez. And finally, from the Contra Costa Community College District Governing Board, Rebecca Barrett. Thank you for joining us and your continued leadership for the region. If there are staff of elected officials on the Zoom, please make sure to say hello in the chat. Speaking of chat, I'll just say one more time, it is open for resource sharing and engagement during the program. Please remain respectful. If you have a question for our Q&A, please use the Q&A feature, not the chat. This helps us track questions more efficiently. Next, I'd like to take a moment to thank the sponsors of our 2023 Capital Series, whose generous support made this event series possible. First, the Contra Costa Community College District, the Building Industry Association of the Bay Area, CEMEX, the Contra Costa Association of Realtors, the Martinez Refining Company, Hospital Council of Northern and Central California, IBEW Local 302, Marathon, Pacific Gas and Electric Company, Phillips 66, and the Western States Petroleum Association. Please join me in recognizing their generous sponsorship of the series and their ongoing support of the Council's mission. And almost finally, I would like to highlight an upcoming major event on the EBLC calendar, Threads of Hope. This new event partnership between the East Bay Leadership Council and Diablo Magazine is set to honor community volunteers and philanthropists who help make our community an amazing place to live. I hope you'll join us at the Lesher Center for the Arts in Walnut Creek on December 6th for that celebration. So, with all of that housekeeping out of the way, now for what we all tuned in for today, it is now my great pleasure to introduce our featured guest, Assemblymember Lori Wilson. Assemblymember Wilson represents California's 11th Assembly District, which covers portions of eastern Contra Costa County, including Oakley, Byron, Discovery Bay, and Bethel Island. Her district then expands across Solano County to include Vallejo to the southwest and Dixon to the northeast. Before being elected to the Assembly in 2022, Lori was elected to the Sassoon City Council in 2012, where she served as vice mayor for 6 years, winning the mayor's race in 2018. With that victory, Lori became the first Black female mayor to serve in all of Solano County. The Assembly member is committed to fighting for residents of her district with a track record of creating good jobs, improving quality of life, and leading with conviction through evolving public health crises and natural disasters as they swept through her district. Her career outside of public service included working as the director of finance for National Home Builders for over 10 years and roles as the chief accountant at Fair Housing, Napa Valley, and an auditor for Solano County. Lori is a graduate of the California State University, Sacramento, Stingers up, with a Bachelor of Science degree in Business Administration and a concentration in accountancy. She is a native Californian raised on the west side of Fresno. Lori is married to her high school sweetheart, They have been blessed with 2 sons, Tyler and Kieran, and a daughter-in-law, Brittany. Please join me in welcoming Assemblymember Lori Wilson. You can unmute, Lori. It's all yours now.
Good afternoon. Thank you for that great introduction. I do want to say I have to add one thing to my bio, and it's the newest one, is I have been blessed to be a grandmother this past June. His name is Weston, and I'm really excited about that. And so that's the new update to the bio.
A great addition. Congratulations. Yeah. So I didn't know if you just wanted to kick us off and talking about what your experience has been like in Sacramento, some of your policy priorities since you've been there, or just a little bit on your background. I kind of will give you the floor at this point before we dive into questions.
Absolutely. Thank you. And I definitely want to leave plenty of time for questions. That's my favorite part of these things. But I have had the pleasure now of serving in the Assembly for a little over 18 months. I am still considered a newbie, a freshman, and loving every minute of it. Once I got here, I was elected in the special on April 5th. And then on April 6th, the very next day I was sworn in. I was made Assistant Majority Whip and had the opportunity to serve on 5 different committees, which I still serve on those same committees. The only difference is in December of last year, I was promoted to Majority Whip. I have the distinct pleasure of being able to serve as chair of the California Legislative Black Caucus, becoming the first freshman ever to be elected chair of an ethnic caucus in our history. So that was definitely a great honor. And halfway through that term and being able to do amazing things as it comes to supporting Black Californians and ensure they have a seat at the table on every single issue. One of the biggest focuses that we're going to do in the next year is reparations, as we've just come off of the historic 2-year groundbreaking study on reparations. And now it's charged with the Black Caucus to be the lead in ensuring the legislative and budget priorities align with what those recommendations were given. I also serve as co-chair of the Delta Caucus. You know, East Bay, that's a huge thing in the East Bay in terms of the Delta is centered right there. And it's also centered right in my district. And so have the opportunity to chair that with Senator Bill Dodd. And I know I'm missing another leadership one, but here's the thing. The cool thing about serving in the Assembly is all the spaces you get to lead, not only in your district, but really on issues across California. And I am one that is focused on quality of life, always been. I was forged in me as a leader over the 12 years that I served in Suisun City, from commissioner all the way to mayor. And that really is, and some people who've heard this before are probably sick of hearing it, but it is really the mantra that I live by. It is, everyone has a right to a high quality of life. Everyone has a right to define what that looks like for themselves. And my job as a government leader, a community leader, a political leader is to facilitate that. That is my only job, is to really improve the quality of life for people as they define it. And so being in this position, I love it because it gives me that opportunity to tackle a number of issues that directly relate to people's quality of life. One of the committees I sit on is banking and finance. And so if you think about what it means to have a high quality of life, you can't have that without accessing a banking or financial institution, right? One of the things that I've done in my background, which was noted in the bio, is housing development, housing production. We have a crisis here in the state of California still as it relates to housing production. Well, we all know that housing is the base needs to be able to have shelter. You can't have a good quality of life without dealing with housing. The other opportunity that I've had a chance to work on in my career has been in Suisun City. We transformed our transportation here. I began to think about, how do people move in and about my community? How do they access their job center, their health center, their economic center, shopping, recreation? And so we began to look at it that way. When I got to the Capitol, and that was the other leadership position I forgot about. When I got to the Capitol, I began to think about, how does that happen when you think of emergency preparedness? Because, as was noted in my bio, we talked about wildfires and natural disasters, and we had issues of evacuation. And so I began to think, at a state level, are we prioritizing our infrastructure projects related to transportation in the context of emergency preparedness? And so I chair the select committee on on the Assembly side on emergency preparedness and transportation and where those two intersect. And so I've had this great opportunity now to, like I said, be in this position for 18 months. It's been wonderful. We had last year 4 bills signed into law. This year, so far, we've had 7. We've been able to get north of $20 million for the district, as well as almost $20 million in statewide funding requests that we've been able to, actually it's higher than that, to be able to champion, from giving the Girl Scouts the resources that they need to be able to comply with the law as it relates to background checks, to even funding air ambulance to fund the extension of resources to them so that we have our air ambulance where we need it, as well as $5 million to fund the first of its kind California Black women's think tank to address issues and disparities as it relates to Black women across California. And I'm really excited to be able to do all things. It is an honor and a pleasure to serve, but it's also a privilege. I count it a privilege to be able to be here with you today and to be engaged and talk about the issues that you care most about, and to learn a little bit more about me. I recognize that in this season, we're in a crazy season. There's national headlines every day on every single topic, and it wears on you. But know that, you know, here in my office, we're here to support. We're here to give you what you need to ensure that you have a high quality of life, as I said, as you define it. And so that's why these types of meetings are so important. It helps me know how you define it, whether it's from in your day job, as most people here are for business and leaders in the business community, but also even in your personal life. And so I appreciate this time, and thank you so much for giving it to me.
Thank you, Assembly Member. I guess I will start was there was another significant piece of your bio that was left off. You had a personal journey and confronted and successfully are now a cancer survivor, adding to that bio. I just wanted to give you space to reflect a bit on that journey for you, and how are you feeling today, and how will that maybe impact some of the decisions you make as a legislator in the years to come.
Thank you for noting that. Yes. So this past March, I was officially diagnosed with breast cancer. And how I found out was just through my regular mammogram. A regular screening, you know, didn't feel anything off or anything of that nature, and had the opportunity to go in February and get a regular screening. And through a series of tests, found out in March that sure enough, I did have breast cancer. And which required several courses of treatment, which included surgery, chemotherapy, radiation, and then a follow-up surgery. And it feels really good to be on the other side of that. It's now been, this Thursday will make 4 weeks since off of doctor's orders and considered cancer-free. So very excited about that. It was an amazing experience. You know, it was definitely challenging, but my mind was surely focused on one thing. Is I knew that it wasn't something I could go around, I could avoid, or anything like that. It was, I knew I had to go through it. And I wanted to make sure that as I went through it, I was the same person in terms of I'm a joyful, optimistic, you know, always excited about life and looking forward to opportunities instead of, you know, pitfalls. And so I wanted to make sure I kept that all the way through. And I'm proud to say I did, not because I did it alone, because I felt like most of the time I was the most privileged person going through cancer because I had so much community support. First of all, my family, of course, was amazing. My friends were amazing. They were dropping off food to my house all the time to help feed my family. My team, whether they were in the Capitol or the district office, were phenomenal, doing so many things for me. But when I got out into the community to get the support that I got, so many people encouraging me, sending me well wishes, prayers, thoughts, all that helped me feel amazing. And I know that was part of why I was able to be so successful. But another reason why I was able to be so successful is, like I said from the beginning, early detection. It was part of my regular screening. And so I just encourage everyone to get their cancer screenings, do that on a regular basis. It matters. It saves lives. And I think it was part of, you know, what allowed me to have a successful outcome. I wish to say that my husband probably wanted me to rest more, but that's not my style. The doctor said to me that I had 6 months off And I looked at her and I said, well, wait a minute. And then she goes, oh, do you want 9 months? And my husband was like, I think you're going in the wrong direction for her. And so we agreed that I would take the 6 months, but I asked her to put in the language intermittent. So that way I can show up when I wanted to show up and be home when I needed to be home. And sure enough, that's what I did. My staff was able to count. I only missed 4 days of actual floor session. So I thought I missed more, but I think that was probably related to the fear of missing out. I did miss quite a few committees, and I had my legislators, filling in for me. And I don't think I mentioned in the beginning, they were amazing. The whole Capitol was amazing. They even did Pink Day at the Capitol in my honor, and others who were surviving or thriving from cancer. So it was just an amazing experience. And I know for a fact there's been some changes in my mind. I call it because I say I'm fearless, and my friends say you've been fearless. I say I'm bold. My friends say I've been bold. I said, well, here's what I'll call it. I leveled up, kind of like what Mario did when he got the mushroom or the star and goes crazy. I think that's how I feel right now, is that I've leveled up, and really people haven't seen anything yet. If they thought they saw a lot before, well, there's a lot more to be done.
Well, we're excited to see what the next level has in store, and so grateful that you are thriving today. So thank you for taking the time to meet with us, even if you're still a little bit against doctor's orders at this point based on their recommendations. So, but thank you for being here. So I wanted to actually take a little bit of a step back. The core geography of the East Bay Leadership Council, long been Contra Costa County and Alameda County. Obviously, you represent some important communities in Contra Costa County, but I also, what should the East Bay and maybe the broader Bay Area community know about Solano County? That really is kind of the heartbeat of your district. Tell us a little bit more about what's happening in Solano and what we should be paying attention to in the East Bay.
Thank you. Well, Solano is definitely a thriving community, and some people forget about, when you're coming from the core Bay Area through Contra Costa, you forget that there's this whole little place you have to get to before you get to Sacramento. And so a lot of times we're forgotten about, but it really is an amazing, amazing county. It's 62% open space and ag. So a lot of things that you eat, a lot of the meat that you get was either raised or grown right here, in Solano County. And of course, we have an amazing wine experience here in Suisun City. I was about to say Suisun City because I'm so used to that, but Suisun Valley, including a number of wineries like Wooden Valley and of course Camus Suisun, which came over from Napa and has the largest, most wonderful footprint right here in Solano County. So it is an amazing county. And I hope that people take an opportunity to visit, as well as look at the different type of manufacturing we have here. Most people know Anheuser-Busch and Jelly Belly, but I was just on a tour of, if you drink Gatorade or if you drink and now I'm forgetting the tea products, but anyway, if you drink one of those, that bottle was made right here in Solano County, as Blue Bend wine, which I just got familiar with, a wonderful wine that the whole point of it is around the blue bin, your recycle bin. So they use 100% recycled bottles, and those are manufactured right here in Solano County. The other thing that we're most known for, I think now that the San Francisco Chronicle, as well as the LA Times, the New York Times, the Washington Post have talked about, is California Forever. And California Forever is right here in Solano County. This is the Flannery Associates purchase of quite a number of acres here, trying to build the next new city in California. So that is something else that's going on in Solano County, in the heart of my district, and about a half mile from my house.
Do you have any insights to share about how that is or is not moving forward? It certainly grabbed a lot of headlines recently with their AI generated renderings. Any reflections that you can share on that topic in particular?
Well, I think it's interesting. They are doing outreach in the community, and the community's response has been tepid. There's some that are really excited, some that's not, and I think it neutralizes one another. I remain skeptical. I am pro housing all the way, and have been, my entire career. And you can see it when you drive through Suisun City, the number of developments that are occurring right now under my prior leadership. So I'm really excited about the opportunity to build new housing. Except at the same time, I want to make sure that we don't have someone coming in and leapfrogging other investments in Solano County. We have a number of infrastructure projects that need to be funded from both the state and federal point of view. A lot of those happen in communities of concern, like in the city of Vallejo, and I want to ensure that they get their resources first. So, my job, like I said, is a facilitator, and to ensure that people have a high quality of life. And if that means creating a new city to do that, I'm game. But at the same time, I want to make sure that we're taking care of everyone's needs and that we're looking at it from a comprehensive point of view and not just look at the bright and shiny that's coming. And I think that, we've had a lot of communication with members of the community about it. I have a town hall later today in Fairfield about it. And so it is the hot topic, and you hear it wherever you go. And best believe, I think probably 75% of, my interactions with the community, California Forever is brought up.
Well, I will move to other hot topics now. It sounds like that'll be well covered at your town hall this evening. So you did mention the manufacturing sector in Solano County. We share that certainly in common with the East Bay. Your seatmate in the Assembly, actually, Assemblymember Tim Grayson, has carried a bill, AB 52, focused on tax credits for manufacturers. So we don't need to get into the specifics of that bill per se, but I'm thinking a lot about how in a highly taxed region, in a highly taxed state, how we can incentivize job growth and best practices on behalf of our businesses. Where do you think tax credits fit in to that strategy? Obviously, you have a very important seat you didn't mention in your bio is a seat on the very powerful Appropriations Committee, in a time of a strained straight budget, or just a more constrained than it has been for certainly the last few years. Where do tax credits potentially fall into your strategy as a legislature?
Right. And as you mentioned, sitting on appropriations and looking at every bill that has some dollar figure above a certain amount, it is a difficult time, right? We saw this past year with the deficit that we had a number of bills that did not get out of appropriations in either house as it relates to, the dollar amount attached to it, the cost to the state. And then we saw the governor veto a number of bills with the same message, talking about, the dollar amount, the cost of state, recognizing the environment that we're in. But I think there's definitely a role for tax credits. Tax credits help keep businesses right here in California. We have rising cost, and a lot of that is goes directly to the consumer, right? Because eventually it gets down all the way to to the main street, right? To be able to purchase whatever good, or the incremental ad that gets down to whatever good someone's purchasing. And so there is a role for tax credits, and we do have to balance that with the deficit. But at the same time, if that company leaves California, then all of that revenue is lost. And so that's where that balance comes in. If we can keep a company here, if we can maintain our companies or attract new companies to California with our tax credit, I think that's a beneficial thing. And there's tax credits that run multiple industry. I know one of the largest tax credits, not largest, but the most talked about tax credit that I remember this past session was for the motion picture, for the film industry, those credits. And there were a big conversation about how do we do these tax credits that help keep this industry vital and thriving here in the state, but at the same time recognizing equity. So I always have that equity lens on. So I think about that in terms of supporting tax credits or not. But yeah, I think they're important and they play a vital role. But this deficit that we're dealing with in the state is making it difficult to pass legislation such as that, or to continue when things have expired. But, I'll usually be on the side of supporting those.
Thank you for your reflections on that. You also brought up housing as a core issue for yourself and certainly the region. You were supportive of some pretty headline housing legislation lists this cycle. I want to thank you for your support. We certainly as an organization see building housing not just where it's easy, but sometimes where it's hard as being a critical component for both our continued economic strength and environmental protection. Because we only build it where it's easy, the housing only gets further and further out. Right. So reflections on those reforms and some of those bills that have come through the legislature in the last few years, and the state's role in helping to address this persistent housing crisis that we experience in the state.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think we have a role to play. A lot of times, I come from local government and we want the state to leave us alone in a lot of ways. But at the same time, not every single jurisdiction is producing the type of housing that it should. And there's a lot of people who have a NIMBYism that says, well, I'll put up whatever roadblocks there is to not have housing in my area. But that can't be the way that we do things to solve the housing crisis. We need to have housing, and we need every single jurisdiction to contribute to that. And that means there's some things that we need to do in terms of CEQA reform to ensure that people can't use that as a barrier to housing. We need to ensure that we have proper infill. One of the bills that I'll be working on this year in conjunction with UCLA students, we did this last year with the Sigma bill, and it did get signed into law by the governor. So it was chaptered. We'll be doing that again on an infill, bill, and it's still being worked out right now, having conversations with stakeholders, determine what's the best way to promote and produce infill housing across the state. And I think that's the issue when you think about the state of California and what we should be doing in the legislature, is that we need to be able to provide tools and flexibility for our local jurisdictions to produce housing. Simple as that. And we have done a lot of incentives, and we should continue to do that, but we should also have a lot of sticks, so to speak. So we got the carrots. I think we have carrots down pretty well, and we still need more, but I think there has to be a consequence to not producing, and in a way that doesn't harm, local economic development nor community members. It's not what those aren't the consequences I'm talking about, but really the consequences that hold people accountable to create an atmosphere to produce housing. Because I recognize, as having served in local leadership, but also in housing development, jurisdictions don't create housing, but they do create an environment for housing to be able to be produced. And that's the goal of the legislature. But that's the goal I would like the legislature to have, is how do we produce an environment? There has been several, as you noted, bills over the last few years to address this, and especially when it comes to streamlining. And I'm always supportive of those, as long as it doesn't, take away local control. It can put guidelines around local control, but at the end of the day, our locals need to determine what's the best for them, as long as they're producing housing, and also not on the backs of our laborers, right? Because the people who actually build the housing, when I'm talking about hammers and nails, we need to be protecting them. And then at the same time, create an environment that it makes it attractive for developers to actually go into a community and build, and limit the amount of building we're doing on county land, because most of our county lands in the state, are green belts. And we don't want to take away agricultural land to build housing, because we won't be able to get that back for over 100 years and restore that. So really it's about those infill, opportunities.
Thank you for that. That's great reflections. You talk about carrots and sticks. There's been more enforcement, the sticks, right, coming, or expectations put on HCD at the state level. The experience of kind of at the local level has been that's been a rocky interaction in how they move those conversations forward and getting their housing elements passed, and different conversations with the state. Does HCD have too much responsibility? What do we need to do to make sure that those enforcements actually have the teeth they need without getting in the way of our local jurisdictions who are trying to play by the rules?
Yeah, and that's an interesting conversation that I've been having actually over the this year, more than even in the prior year. In the prior year, I was more like a brand new legislator, and all my conversations were 15 minutes. But it's been great over the past year, like the last 12 months, starting with last fall, to have longer conversations about housing. And there were a constant theme was HCD. And so that is something that we've decided to delve into, and we'll be talking more about in the coming year, is how do we then, I don't want to use the word reform. I don't have the right word yet for HCD, but there's more support that needs to be given there. There's more accountability that needs to be given there. And what does that look like from the legislature point of view, when that is a department, right, within the governor's administration? How can the legislature intervene so that HCD is more supportive in what they're supposed to be doing, right? I've heard several times about it being a roadblock. And I know the secretary there is committed, to housing and ensuring our communities are performing well, designed well, all of those needs. But I think there needs to be more accountability to that department. So we'll look at how to do that in the spirit of collaboration between the legislature and that particular department, and of course the governor's office.
I'm sure there's lots of local civic leaders that'll be excited to have that conversation with you. There's a lot of strong opinions as it relates to that interaction with the state over particularly the last year. You talked about roadblocks, so I'm gonna take a transition. We're gonna move to transportation for a minute, if that's all right with you. There was a measure that certainly there were some strong concerns from our organization from this last cycle put forward about increasing bridge tolls to fund transit. Obviously, there's incredible needs to fund a thriving and continued transit network in the Bay Area that's critical to our economy and quality of life.
Yes.
The question becomes how we fund it and what accountability or reforms are in place. Senator Scott Winter identified you as someone who he's going to work with closely on that process in the next session. I kind of give the floor to you on that. What are you going to be focused on in those conversations as it relates to transit funding?
Right. And I think too, like, as you noted in the intro to this, is the overall goal is to have a thriving network in the Bay Area, right? Of transportation, and that everybody is agreed on that part. Like we need that. And that's not just about, BART, but it's about all of the various forms of public transportation and really, the highway infrastructure. And how do you fund it? I think there's a role for the state to play, just like the state plays a strong role in funding housing and grant programs like that. There needs to be that same level of funding from the state for transportation because it's integral. And you can't have a high quality of life without quality transportation, whatever that looks like. But then you have in the 9-county Bay Area, you have counties like mine, Solano County, where, you're asking us, we're the ones using the bridge, like a lot of communities in Contra Costa, we're using the bridge. But the funding for this actual increase that was given does not go back to Contra Costa County or Solano County.
How do we ensure that Solano County and the East Bay get our fair share? Maybe that's where you're going next. That's certainly top priority for us.
It is. And that's something we brought up, which is how we got into the discussions of, okay, we have to pause this because the assembly members who represent these areas are not going to support a measure where we don't get our fair share and increasing the cost burden for our commute without the opportunity to increase transportation here. So if you think about someone in Solano, they can say they can't choose to not go across that bridge because the transit agencies here are poorly funded. And there's reasons why we need to do consolidation and things like that. But at the same time, it's the fair share argument's not there. And so one thing that I'm working with Senator Weiner on, and we've written down quite a number of proposals. We're going back to members of the Bay Area caucus actually next week to talk through those proposals and see where the appetite is. But I can tell you that there is not appetite for a bridge toll, increase, and it's tied especially to the amount that they were given, nor with an escalator. But we do have to figure out how to fund these agencies and what that looks like. And I best believe the full Bay Area caucus is concerned about that. And there's a number of us who are part of this small, working group that's led by Senator Weiner and myself, and we will get to a solution that we will then go back to our communities with. So I don't mean a solution and we're just going to announce it. It means then we go back to our communities and see what the appetite is for there, and then work ourselves to something that we can announce. And that's really important to me, for everyone to be engaged on the issue who wants to be.
And speaking of kind of where it will go in terms of engaging the public, it seems like there is going to be some ballot measures coming forward in November of next year. One that would certainly play a big role in how housing and transportation projects are funded, or agencies are funded by lowering the voter threshold. Have you taken a close look at that issue yet? Is that something that, or do you have any concerns about that kind of reform, or is that something you're going to support next year?
No, it's something I support. I supported it when it was in the legislature. I supported giving it to the voters, and it's something I generally support. Because I recognize that when the community says it needs something, the community needs to be able to then get it across the finish line, right? And so when you have like a whole third of a community, or a fourth, depending on what the threshold is, saying no, and then the vast majority of people want this resource, want that infrastructure, whatever it is, they should be able to get that infrastructure. And so we have to find a way to fund. The only way to find a way to fund community things is by the community. And if a community comes together and say, we need this, they should be able to get what they need and to be able to fund it, because they're saying, hey, I want to tax myself. So this allows the lowering of the threshold to say that as a community, I want to invest in my community.
In terms of, would you have any concerns about that kind of lowered threshold, making it for regional measures, right? Making it so that you raise the tax for transportation regionally, and we're not getting, again, our share in Solano, Contra Costa, and Alameda, because now it got easier. They don't need us as much to pass these measures. With that, how would we protect ourselves in that environment where it's even easier to pass tax measures, right, than it was before?
Well, and that's part of my concern in general in terms of fair share, because see, when they were doing the bridge tolls, they wrote that in the legislation that it's going to these. And so we need to we need to make it so that if whatever tax increase it is, properly allocated. And that's something else we can do. We don't have to do a constitutional amendment to do that. We could do that through legislation. And I think that's really key, is that we have a return to source, if at all is possible, that there is some portion of a return to source. It doesn't have to be 100%, but there needs to be some level of return to source, and that you can't do a measure without some level of return to source within it.
Thank you. Thank you for that. So I'm going to stick on the ballot for a second. In March, Proposition 1 is going to be on the ballot, focused on mental health reform and services. What should we be paying attention to in that space as business leaders, as we look towards that ballot in March?
Right. I think it's really important. It's something that is, of course, top of mind to the governor. He's fully engaged on this issue. I think that, we've spent a lot of resources in this space, and we haven't really gotten a return on our investment, I would say. When you think about from a business point of view, there are still, people who are struggling with mental health issues or homeless, impacting, ability to operate a business well, right? Especially when it comes to, mom and pop retail. So I think that, this is a good thing. However, at the same time, there has to be accountability with these resources, because we've been here before. We've been here before where we've asked for money, received money, been able to do these types of laws, but there's not a lot of accountability. And I'm still concerned about that when it comes to this proposition.
Yeah, I will. So we'll kind of pivot back. We got a couple questions related to transportation in the Q&A here. Okay. One focused on, as we continue to think about our growing aging population and those with disabilities who cannot drive and or utilize traditional fixed-use public transportation, how do these kind of funding mechanisms, how can we ensure that those neighbors in the East Bay and Solano County are cared for? Is that a top priority for you in these funding mechanisms moving forward?
Absolutely. I mean, I think when you look at all these aspects of these big topic ideas, from transportation, housing, environment, all of that, you have to think about our most vulnerable population, and that is our aging population. There were many in the legislature in the prior years talked about the silver tsunami, and people kind of didn't pay attention to that, but it's here, right? And we didn't have the right laws in place to be able to protect them in a way that they wouldn't be left behind, which we see with all the metrics, they have been left behind. So I think when it comes into this transportation issue, particularly, and how do we fund transportation, is ensuring that the specific and unique needs of transportation of those who have mobility issues are taken care of as well. And so I completely support that, and definitely have that factored into our discussions.
Well, thank you. Thank you for that. I'm going to take a quick shift towards healthcare. We've got some questions in that space. There was a compromise struck in the legislature this year related to the healthcare minimum wage. I had some mixed feelings about that, as we're looking at a healthcare industry with 1 in 5 hospitals at risk of closure. A report that came out earlier this year, the finances are not a slam dunk in the healthcare sector.
Yeah.
And Medi-Cal reimbursement rates continue to be a problem that plagues the healthcare industry. As you look at unfunded mandates, is what I would call kind of that healthcare minimum wage that was ended up being enacted. What's your approach in the healthcare space or others with those kind of unfunded mandates that the state can pass down from time to time?
Yeah, that was a hard one, because I recognized the need, but at the same time, the financial burden of it was great. And we heard about it constantly from, our hospitals to our public health centers to, even our retirement homes that have incorporated healthcare in them. And there was that negotiated settlement. So a lot of people, including myself, voted for it. There was a different type of estimated of the price tag, especially to the state, because this impacted the state, as well as the recognition that there would have to be follow-up legislation. And since then, now there's been a number of reports that talks about the cost, and the price tag is ridiculous, so much so that if the price tag was known, there is no way probably it would have got out. Not probably, there was no way it would have gotten out the legislature with that being known. And so now we have to look to the cleanup language, right? To really tailor that so that it doesn't have the cost that it does. But to the overall point of these unfunded mandates, it's interesting, from a local leader's point of view, something we talk about regularly. I remember going to Cal Cities, talking about my local leaders, and then I get here and now have to vote on legislation that provides these unfunded mandates, where there's these guidelines or policies that are good for the state, but who's going to pay for them? And I'll be honest, I haven't yet figured that out yet, how that's going to work, and how I'm going to adjust next year. Because I think in the first year, I was thinking, okay, well, we'll figure it out or we'll do this. But then I'm learning that doesn't happen. And so I think definitely in the coming year, it's going to adjust not only how I vote on things, but how early I engage. A lot of times, as a new legislator, I'm like, okay, well, they're working on it, so I'll let them work on it and support what comes out of it. But now I realize there definitely needs to be an additional voice there, and won't delegate they're working on it, but to make sure I'm being proactive from the very beginning.
Thank you. I'm moving from crisis to, I realize we got a lot of crises and not a whole lot of resources, or at least prioritizing of resources that needs to happen in the state in the years to come. The next one I'd like to talk about is insurance. There was a comment, our incoming board chair starting in July, Danielle Kagan, certainly cares deeply about this issue as an executive at CSA Insurance. You saw firsthand the escalating wildfires. I think when you were a mayor in Sassoon, right, the LNU lightning complex fire came right through your community. I mean, not through your community, but right on your back door.
For the evacuation area.
Yeah, evacuation areas. So there was a recent executive order on this issue, but the climate is changing, the industry is changing, and we need to make sure that we are that folks can access the insurance they need, and the industry can continue to provide that service for our community. Any reflections on kind of that insurance crisis process, those discussions in the legislature, and the recent action by the governor?
Yeah, I don't think the recent action has gone far enough. I don't think it fixes the issue by any stretch of the imagination. This was a hot topic at the end, and especially in the last, 30 days of the legislature, including in the last 2 weeks, where we thought there were going to be some kind of negotiated language that we could do a bill that we can vote on. And we were all disappointed when it wasn't, because this is impacting, people talk a lot about it impacting homeowners. These are impacting our businesses. There are wholesale businesses that cannot get insurance, are either underinsured or have no insurance, which is, an unnecessary risk. And leads to the increased cost of doing business in California. And there is no way that we could be the 4th largest economy and not have our insurance problems resolved. There was a lot of different solutions, and I'm open to a lot of them as they were coming to me. But like I said, we couldn't get to a settled solution to be able to vote on anything. But I think it's something that the legislature has to deal with as soon as they get back. And we can't just leave the insurance commissioner to do it on his own. It is a combined effort between the governor's administration, the insurance commissioner, and the legislature. We definitely have a part to play in resolving this issue, because people have to be able to live here and have insured homes. because it's not just the wildfires. It's regular right here in our regular cities that don't even have that level of wildfire risk. We have, our companies leaving, and part of it is self-inflicted. No one likes rate increases, but I tell you, if you do them slowly over time, it allows for, risk to be absorbed. It's these large spikes when you hold it for a long time and then have to do a large spike, everybody gets up in arms about, but it still is less expensive than what it could be and the cost that you would have to pay for insurance. So like I said, I think the legislature has a role to play. And I would expect that that is something that you'll see us tackle as soon as we get through our 2-year, end of deadline in January.
Thank you for that. I'm going to ask a little bit about how the energy economy and manufacturing. Obviously, it plays a role in Solano County's economy, just as it does in the East Bay. We believe very strongly as an organization in all of the above energy future, to not be picking winners and losers in this process, but by creating an energy ecosystem that can support the economy and a local workforce. What's your approach when you address issues related to energy sources, workforce, power reliability, energy demands? What's your approach in that area of your work in the state legislature?
Well, definitely, and all of the above, right? I think that in order to deal with, energy in our state, that we have to have a diverse portfolio of energy offerings. So I've been that way and support that approach. I also think that, especially when it comes to incentivizing, we need to be neutral and incentivize and provide the resources. I do allow for, in my own personal view, carve outs when another industry needs more than a different one to be able to catch up, because I do want a diverse portfolio of energy. I think the state has to do more in reinvesting in investments in our infrastructure. I think it's ailing and failing and not living up to where we need to be, especially in terms of our own goals that we set. And then also ensuring that we have reliability for our businesses. I was talking with the company that I just went on a tour on, and they were noting that when they get a heads up from from PG&E that the power is going to go out, and then they have 30 minutes to shut down. And can you imagine what they're doing, how fast they're going, having to shut down the entire plant in 30 minutes. And that is ridiculous that happens in our state. And so we have to do more in this arena, and I'm committed to that.
Thank you for that. I'm gonna keep it going. We only have a couple more minutes. I have a lot of things and questions that I would love to ask you.
That means you gotta have me back.
I know, I'll have you back anytime. I would love to chat with you. It's been a real pleasure. So, childcare costs. This is something that certainly has had a big impact on the workforce as we build back an equitable economic recovery in our region. So, how do you hope to take on this issue? You've got reimbursement rates. You've got the number of subsidized slots is a growing concern. As you think about this kind of like childcare, growing costs and concerns for the region, what's the role of the legislature, and what might we be able to do in the next few years to help address that crisis?
Yeah, that's really difficult because it's really is a worker shortage, right? There's not enough workers in childcare, and there's not enough facilities, which has the rising costs. I think about, my son just had a son, and he doesn't have to worry about childcare, but the friends that he was having, being pregnant at the same time with, they were signing up the moment they got pregnant for childcare, right? And you can't have a thriving, equitable economy without an ability to have a strong childcare base and know that your children are protected and safe, while you're out in the workforce. And I think it's a freedom, especially for women who particularly are the ones who have to stay home still and take care of children. It allows them to be free in their career. And so I think there's a role for the legislature, but as I've gotten into trying to deal with this issue, I haven't been a leader on this front, but I have legislators who have, and as they talk to me about the issues, and when they're thinking about, wanting to talk to me about their bills, there was this frustration that the governor took away some of the subsidized slots and deferred those when we had the deficit. But at the same time, when we got boots on the ground, they're like, there's not enough. It's not like those slots are being filled anyway, because there's not enough childcare workers or childcare facilities. And so looking at how do then we reverse that and help provide stability to that market so that we can increase that. Noting that this issue of worker shortage in that area, it is a constant theme. a constant theme throughout, every industry talks about this worker shortage, and we do not have enough workers. And this was talked about like years ago. College students will tell you, like, I remember them saying that, we're going to have a worker shortage in a number of years, but we're finally here where we don't have the number of workers that we need to support the economy that we have. And so that is a, really hard fix. But
we could have an entire forum on workforce development, I think, like, no doubt about it. And maybe we'll do that next. I did want to, before we wrapped, you have stood up for vulnerable communities in a number of ways. You talked about elders, you talked about young people, but you've also stood up for our transgender neighbors. And what's been your experience speaking out on that issue, and how can our communities do better?
Thank you. Yeah, my experience has been great. Bittersweet, I'll tell you that, though. I mean, it's been challenging in the number of people that really have a level of vitriol towards this community that is just completely unfounded. This is a community that people think they need to be protected from, but really we need to protect this community. It's very vulnerable, but it's been a pleasure and an honor, really, to be able to be a champion. They don't yet have a champion in terms of someone from the transgender community in the legislature. We haven't had that first yet, but I've had the opportunity to be the first parent with an open transgendered child. And it really has been a pleasure and honor to serve in this space and to meet so many across our state who are proud and who want to see change in this area. So I'll continue to fight and protect. I had a bill this last session that, made it all the way through. We'll take that victory to the governor's desk. It did get vetoed, but we'll try again in a different way to ensure that TGI or transgender, gender diverse, or intersex people, whether they're children or adults, are protected in California and know that this is a safe place for them to be and also to thrive. And they don't have to worry about, hatred or vitriol that you're seeing in other parts of our nation.
Thank you for your work and reflections on the space. You're right that it's a community that needs a leader. And so thank you for doing that. Finally, a question in terms of kind of leadership. You were a founding member. I'm getting local. I'm going to take a step back again. We've taken on a lot of big issues. A founding member of WIP Solano, Women in Pipeline. What more can we do to support women leaders in our community?
I think creating opportunities or platforms, sorry, my dog's yelling at maybe the postman, but to create opportunities for women to thrive, give them platforms, tap them on the shoulder for leadership positions, board positions in particular, because there's different ways to elected office, and also make sure that you're telling a woman that she should run. I think that's the key part, is that women need to know and hear it several times. Usually when you tell a guy, he's like, yeah, I can do that. But usually when you tell a woman, they think, yeah, I could do that. But they think about their family obligations, their work obligations, their community obligations, think about everything else that could get away without running. And so WIP Solano is about creating visionary women leaders, no matter what position, from elected to appointed to just, leading companies. That's what we're about. And so I just encourage everyone, make sure you give women platform, you tap them on the shoulder for leadership opportunities, and just overall support them.
Well, and if we can be a resource, the East Bay Leadership Council hosts Build a Bench, a candidate training program that we've been running for a few years now. I hope that as you are tapping shoulders, that we can also be tapping those folks and bringing them into our program as well. We do have a graduate elected in Solano County. We have one graduate in Solano County. So happy to grow that base and not just focus on Contra Costa and Alameda County. Awesome. All right, so final question. Snap your fingers and change one policy in the state of California. We've talked about a lot of different things. Policy, it could be taken any direction, anything you would like to see changed. If you didn't have to deal with the politics and the committees and the legislative votes, what's that one thing that you would change?
What is the one thing? Oh my gosh, you put me on the spot. I don't know. There's like literally my mind flooded with so many things. So snap my fingers, one policy. Oh my goodness.
You can answer this differently when we sit down a year from now. Just what this morning. If you were going to change something this morning.
If I can change one thing, what would it be? Is that it probably is, I'll tell you, one of my little heart's desires, little secret heart's desire, is to make sure I had the opportunity to attend Edison Computech when junior high and high school. So I learned how to code from 7th grade all the way through 12th grade computer science. And so I wish that computer science was thoroughly integrated from kindergarten or pre-K, TK, all the way to 12th grade. And so if I could snap my fingers and make that happen, it would be that is all the way through high school. I mean, through all of your years, every year.
Well, let's get it done. Let's snap our fingers. Thank you for taking the time to meet with us today. I hope that we'll be able to organize something where we get together in person soon. You're a joy, and thank you for your leadership. We look forward to working together in the years to come. So,
well, thank you for your leadership of the past year, and as well as to the entire group. Thank you for all the things you do in your community and all the ways you step up and partner and create opportunities for everyone.
Great. Thank you, Assembly Member. So just thank you all, and thank you for everyone who joined us this afternoon. We value your attendance and your ongoing engagement with the East Bay Leadership Council. I plugged it at the beginning. I'm going to plug it again. I hope you'll join us at Threads of Hope on December 6th as we celebrate community volunteers and philanthropists. And if you're not a member of the East Bay Leadership Council, why not? Let's change that. Our organization is strong as a result of an ever-growing network of business and civic leaders. So thank you for tuning in today. Thank you for joining us. And I will see you all soon.